talking about Birdie Bird batting, various fabrics that I've added to my stash. The book review for this week will be a book called Love Fat Quarter Quilts. I'll be demonstrating 10 styles of flaps, and there's a great giveaway at the end. I'm Sarah Lawson from Sew Sweetness. Thanks so much for joining me for Social Sunday, my weekly sewing chat. Hey everyone, happy Sunday and welcome to Social Sunday. Thank you so much for joining me for the show. I see Gloria is watching from Tennessee. My mom is watching. I'm assuming my dad also. Joyce is watching from Florida. And Tony says hello to me and Danny. Marion's watching from Georgia. So welcome to the show. As a friendly reminder, just about everything that I talk about during Social Sunday are things that I've purchased myself. So these are not things that I'm getting paid to talk to you about, but just cool things that I found that I'd like to share with you. And everything that I'm scheduled to talk about, I link to in the description. So if you're interested in finding out more about any of the books, fabrics, notions, or projects, just check that link in the description and you can find out more information there. So I've noticed the past few weeks, and I've noticed this has been happening to other Facebook accounts as well, but you might notice either on YouTube or Facebook spam replies to your comments, and we've been noticing these spam replies are generally along the lines of, hey, you've won a prize. I noticed last week the comment was, hey, you won a prize, please telegraph us your information. I've noticed in the past some of these spam accounts also might ask for your phone number or credit card information. And just as a reminder, for all of our giveaways, we don't ask for anything like that, especially the credit card information. Danny's going to put a picture on the screen. This was the winner. This is actually tonight's winner. And this is what my reply looks like. And my replies pretty much always look the same. I usually say, congratulations, you've won this week's giveaway. Yay, please email me at sarah@sewsweetness.com. Thanks for watching. I pretty much always reply to the winners with the same information and ask for you to email me. So we don't ever send messages via personal message. I always ask for you to email me, and we conduct all queries between customers and any questions. Everything's conducted via email. So we're going to be on the lookout. It seems like the spam bots tend to hit the morning after the live show. So Danny's going to be on the lookout for that going forward, but just a heads up. If you see a reply and it looks a little fishy, like asking for your telegraph information or anything like that, don't reply, don't give them any information. If necessary, just mark it as spam or report it is the best that I can say. But again, Danny will be looking out for that. So let's get on to more fun things. The notion of the week is actually something, speaking of Facebook, this is called Birdie Bird batting, and I actually found this via I am a sucker for Facebook ads, and I feel like a lot of Facebook ads really get me. So I've bought a lot of things via Facebook ads. I usually look on Facebook on my desktop computer. I don't know if that helps improve the ads compared to my cell phone, but I've bought a lot of things from Facebook ads in the past that I'm very pleased with, including this batting. Danny's going to switch to the overhead camera. Stacy says the scammers need to take up sewing, then they won't have any free time. Yeah, that's true, Stacy, very true. I like that comment. Danny's going to switch to the overhead camera, and I cut a little square of the batting. One, because I wanted to use the rest of it, and two, because it would be hard to show it would be easier just to show a smaller piece on the show. So I don't know if you can see it on camera, but the whole outer edge is stitched like this because it is, thank you, Danny. It is one layer of batting stitched to a layer of flannel. So the flannel is the side that looks more white in color, and the batting is the side that's a little bit loftier and more cream colored. So the idea behind this batting is, and I can see it's patented, so I'm assuming there's nothing else like this on the market. If you machine quilt your quilts at home, generally let's just pretend this is a little quilt backing. Generally, you're attaching the backing, making a quilt sandwich, and then having your quilt top on the top. And a lot of times people are either hand tying their quilts, they're using pins to hold all 3 layers together, or they're spray basting. So this Birdie Bird batting kind of eliminates that and allows you to get right over to your machine and machine quilt. So let me pull the top off for just a second. So the backing of the quilt is what goes against the layer of the flannel. So I'm gonna just attach that like that. And Danny, can you switch back to the front camera just for 1 second? So I'm gonna, if you have flannel for laying out your quilt blocks like a design wall, you already know this is true, but here, as you can see, the fabric is on the flannel and it's not falling away from it. So that's the purpose of having the layer of the flannel, so that your backing stays put without kind of shifting or moving in your quilt sandwich. Danny, you can switch back to the overhead. Okay, so we've got that quilt backing on the flannel, and then the quilt top actually goes on the layer with the batting, so the cream colored. And so according to the instructions, they would like you to fold every either 6 or 10 inches. So basically, when I was sitting here thinking about this earlier, it's kind of similar to if you're folding fabric onto like the boards that the bolts come on. You're basically kind of folding it, making sure everything's smooth with your fingers. The reason that you're kind of folding this over in a single layer is so you can get it over to your sewing machine and get started with the quilting, rather than dragging like the whole quilt just as a flat piece over to the machine. So I'm really looking forward to machine quilting, because when I first started quilting, I did machine quilt. I wasn't really satisfied with my machine quilting skills as far as keeping all the layers together. I felt like something either got bunched up on the top or the bottom, but I really am looking forward to using this batting. It's available in several different sizes. I purchased the twin size. They also have it available by the yard, but I've linked to the Birdie Bird website in the description in case you're interested in checking it out. And I'm super excited about this. One thing I would like to mention is, because it's the 2 layers, the flannel and the batting are stitched together, I recommend just leaving it in a single piece and then just trimming the excess after you're done quilting, because they're stitched together. If it's cut up into a smaller piece, you'll have the pieces loose rather than being stitched together. And I think because it's already stitched together as it comes to you, I think that's an important feature of it as well. So when choosing the packaging, try to purchase the package closest to the size of the actual quilt that you're making. So yeah, very excited about that batting. I guess with some sewing and quilting items, you assume that all the different types of batting are the same and nothing will ever change, but I guess the Birdie Bird batting proves that there's room for some, I guess, innovation in the batting space. Jesse says, would this be good for baskets? That is a good question. I suppose I haven't tried it for a basket. Like I mentioned, the stitching is kind of an important feature. Perhaps if you cut it up and then stitched it first before attaching the fabric. I'm not sure. If anyone has used it for baskets, let us know in the comments, and Danny will try to look out for that and put it up on the screen. Connie says, does the batting drape nicely? I've used a lot of like warm and natural batting in the past. I really like this. Obviously, it's a little bit thicker because there's the layer of flannel, but honestly, the flannel is super thin. So I do think this is pretty nice. I'm not a batting connoisseur. I haven't used a whole different, actually, no, I have used several different types of batting in my quilts. So I wouldn't hesitate using this batting to make a quilt, and let's see if I can make a smallish quilt next and machine quilt it myself. I haven't machine quilted one for many years. Windless Original says, is it cotton? Yes, it is. It says on the package too, 100% cotton batting and then 100% cotton flannel. So both layers are 100% cotton. Ella says, how heavy or light is the Birdie batting compared to regular cotton battings? Yeah, so I do find that it's very similar to Warm and Natural, or if you've used the Pellon 100% cotton, I feel like it's similar to those. I have used some wool batting in the past, and it's a little bit different than the wool. Obviously, it's a different substrate as well, but I do feel it's very similar to the Warm and Natural. All right, so I have a question for you. Let me know in the comments if you are a quilter. How do you usually finish your quilts? Do you usually use a spray base? Do you usually use pins? Let me know in the comments how you're usually finishing the quilts. I've used spray base in the past a whole bunch of times, but I'm not too wild about spraying that around in the house, so I'm looking forward to using this new batting. All right, also a friendly reminder, since Christmas Day and New Year's Day falls on Sundays, both of them fall on Sundays this year, at least in the United States. We will not be having a Social Sunday show on those 2 days, but I'm sure A, you might be celebrating, or B, perhaps working on some projects. So we have 2 more Social Sunday shows left to go before the holidays. So I'm planning on packing plenty of information into those 2 shows, certainly. So new fabrics that I've added to my stash. I guess sort of a hodgepodge again, per usual, of different fabric lines. Danny's going to switch to the overhead camera. I purchased 4 different fabrics with a Pegasus theme print. So I got 2 lights and 2 darks. I thought this would be a good exterior, that would be a good lining. And then here's my 2 darks. It doesn't often happen that I purchase for exterior and lining. This time I did happen to do so. I thought these would be good for smaller pouches, as the print is not a large scale print like I normally like to use, but I do need to accommodate fabric for pouches sometimes as well. I just got this one print from the Florida 2 fabric line from Sarah Watts. Let me open it up just a little bit. Dolphins, some fish, some coral reef type designs. And then these next 2 fabrics, I usually choose bright colors, but for some reason these designs kind of spoke to me, sort of woodland creature type of designs, and they do have a little metallic in them. I'm not sure if this, I think it is showing up on the camera. So in the fox print, thank you, Danny. In the fox print, there's some metallic silver, and then in this deer, there's also some metallic silver in certain portions. All right, the next one is a quail print from Cassidy Demkov from the Flora fabric line. It's kind of it's not a bright white, the background, it's sort of a, I don't know if I'd say cream colored. I guess off-white would be the best way to describe that. And these last 3 fabrics are not from the same fabric line, but I kind of saw them and felt like they sort of went together. So I thought maybe this for exterior or this for lining, or on the flip side, these little snips would be a good exterior with that lining. I'm not really sure yet. I'm kind of leaning toward the birds, but not sure. All right, so all these fabrics are linked to in the description in case you're interested in checking them out after the show. And I have another question for you. Let me know in the comments. Hypothetical scenario, say you're in a quilt shop and you come across the most beautiful fabric you've ever seen. How many yards do you buy? So I recently bought, well, maybe a year ago would be more accurate. I found this really great horse print that I liked, and I thought, well, this would be great fabric to sew sort of a travel set. So I bought, it was from Spoonflower, not the cheapest fabric, but I did buy 5 yards of this print. So far only made 1 thing from it, but I do keep it on a roll, and I kind of look at it fondly whenever I'm in the mood to sew a project. And I know I'll get to the travel set, the full travel set eventually, but let me know in the comments again, how many yards do you buy? Most beautiful fabric you've ever seen. So I was planning on making dinner tonight, but instead we had leftovers. So This particular recipe that I've been wanting to try will be our dinner for tomorrow night. Danny's going to put a picture up on the screen. This is from the recipes website. This is from Skinny Taste. It's the vegetarian enchiladas with butternut squash and black beans. I have, no lie, like 7 butternut squashes right now because I got a bunch of vegetables from the farm in the last couple of weeks. My bearded dragon does eat butternut squash and it's her favorite, but it takes her about a couple weeks to go through a whole butternut squash. I actually use a potato peeler to peel some shavings and I kind of dice it up, so that's how she eats it. Looking forward to using one of the 7 of the butternut squashes in that recipe tomorrow. I really love Mexican food. I love black beans, so I thought, hey, butternut squash and black beans, that really sounds delicious. So I'll let you know how that goes with that recipe, but that's what we'll be having for dinner tomorrow night. I wanted to share, I just finished it up earlier today, those cross-stitch ornaments that I've been talking about recently. Danny's going to switch to the overhead camera. I'm so excited. This was really fun to make. Danny's going to, I know he's going to zoom in. So here's my finished ornament, cross-stitch. It's actually cross-stitched on perforated paper, which I'll show you in a second on the second one that I'm starting in a minute. And then these little beads get sewn on at the end. The beads were super easy to attach, really fun. And then the completed cross stitch gets glued. Zoom in on the bead? Sure. Yeah, there you can see the beads a little bit better. So really easy to sew on. And then I purchased some stiff felt to glue on the back. I just used a glue stick to glue that on, and then I actually attached my wonder clips just around the edges to kind of hold it for a half hour to allow the glue to set. So had great fun working on this, and I started the second one that I wanted to work on today. And then this is what the perforated paper looks like. I know I showed it on past Social Sunday shows, but I found that this was a lot easier on my hands than holding a hoop because the paper is just really light and it's nothing that I have to grip overly hard. So I feel like this one probably took me a couple weeks, so I'm guessing this one will also take me a couple weeks. As you can see, it's got beads on it as well. And I also bought some Halloween ones that I haven't shown on the show. Maybe I'll show those sometime early next year, but working my way through the Christmas versions for sure. And if you're interested in these, I've linked to this in the description. And I do have a book review for this week. The book is called Love Fat Quarter Quilts. And Danny's going to switch again to the overhead camera. I have a bunch of books waiting to be reviewed, cross stitch, little kids books, but this one kind of spoke to me for today's book review. It's an assortment of quilts. I would say this would be a pretty good, easy, beginner-ish quilt because it's just the squares and the half square triangles. Love the bright colors on this quilt. This one is, I think this one's paper pieced. It is paper pieced. This one's a lot more neutral background, but this one's called Let's Get Cozy. I really like, there's a few smaller projects in the book, like this heated water bottle holder, but most of the projects are actually quilts. Oh, I love that bracelet too, by the way, I just noticed that. Mostly modern fabrics used in the quilts in the book. I saw several made with art gallery fabrics too. I don't normally like quilts with like little squares like this, but actually I really enjoy the design from this particular one. And I like this because this gives you a chance to feature sort of a large scale print as shown right here, this large print from Anna Maria Horner. I think this is going to be the one that I make first. I just really love the pop of color. I'm a solids quilter, so this one sort of reads to me like solids, so that's why that one stood out to me. This is actually a big quilt. This is 57 by 76, so just a few blocks in this particular quilt. I like this one as well with the stars, but probably second place to that one I mentioned previously. Oh, actually, I love this one too. Tonal trees. I've seen this one a bunch online, so I'm happy to have this particular pattern in my stash. And then this one would be a good beginner quilt because it's just all squares. But this book is called Love Fat Quarter Quilts, and if you're interested, if any of those quilts caught your eye, I've linked to the book in the description. So Danny's favorite part of the Sunday show, we'd like to invite all of the bag makers to stand proud. Let us know in the comments that you're part of the So Sweetness squad. Danny and I are both really grateful that you've tuned into the show, whether you're watching live or watching the recording later on during your week, and we really appreciate you so much. So Danny, are you ready?
I'm ready.
We're interrupting the show for a special report.
Because now it is time for Bag Lab.
All right, so for Bag Lab this week, this is sort of a continuation from the Bag Lab from 2 weeks ago where I was discussing the cargo pockets. I promised I would follow that up with a demonstration on different styles of flaps. And so that is today's episode of Bag Lab. So I've linked to in the description. Danny, I'm gonna have Danny switch to the overhead camera. I created a PDF file with 10 different styles of flaps. So it's 8 pages to print, nothing to tape together. But all of the different styles of flaps, depending on what your needs are, if you want one with curves, with some straight edges. And I went ahead and cut all these out before the show just so I could show you all the different styles. This one's sort of a diagonal style flap. I tried to hit as many different sort of types as possible. And then I'm actually going to demonstrate sewing 2 of these live on the show tonight. So, all right, so just a mention about these different styles of flaps. Depending on your needs, you can increase or decrease these pieces while you're printing. And I do have a link to a video that I previously filmed about increasing or decreasing pattern pieces. And what else was I going to say about that? I've also linked to the video for the cargo pocket in case you're interested in pairing a flap with a cargo pocket. The cargo pockets will be part of the demonstration for tonight. So I'm going to do demonstrate 2 different kinds of flaps. Here's the cargo pocket from previously where the cargo pocket was the entire width of the bag. This is just the front of the Baker Street bag, which is a free pattern and video. So as you can see, the top edge of this cargo pocket was finished, and then raw edges were left on the sides and the bottom, and it was just sewn to the body of the bag. So that's the first style I'm going to sew and discuss on the show. And then the second style, again from the cargo pocket demonstration, was when the cargo pocket was completely finished. So meaning no raw edges on the cargo pocket. And I'm going to do the same thing for the flap. No raw edges will be present on the finished flap. So since I previously assembled the cargo pocket, the female portion of the magnetic snap was attached to the actual cargo pocket. And before the show, I went ahead and installed the male portion of the magnetic snap into the lining piece. So the piece that will be closed against the cargo pocket. And I used my rivet press because I have some magnetic snaps that are installed via a rivet press. I added Shape Flex and fusible fleece. Fusible fleece is cut smaller. I have a little square of Decovil Heavy. You can use Peltex also just to reinforce the snap. And if you wish also, you can fuse a little piece of Pellon Shape Flex over that metal just to kind of cover it. That's completely optional, but I just wanted to mention how I prepped the pieces before I got started with sewing. And I'm going to start with this flap. For this particular flap, I'm going to leave the top edge raw because I'm going to sew that to the top of the bag. And what I did was I used this particular pattern piece and I kind of took a look at everything before I started. I generally like to install the flap part of the magnetic snap 1 inch up from the bottom edge of the flap. That's pretty much my go-to. It keeps it out of the seam allowance, but closer enough to the bottom edge that it's easy to grab and open and close. And for that, I just needed to modify my pattern piece. So what I did was I kind of held my pattern piece on the center of the snap that was already existing. I made a note of where 1 inch was up from the bottom edge of the flap, and then this orange line that I drew, that's where I made a note of where I wanted to cut the flap off so that I could sew it to the top edge. So I'm going to go ahead and start by sewing these two pieces together. I'm going to sew them right sides together just along the side and bottom edge. So I'm going to leave the top edge unsewn. So I'm just going to go ahead and use my wonder clips to hold those layers in place. And I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew this using 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so since there's a curved edge over here, I'm going to make little notches just where the curve is. So cutting a little V within the seam allowance, again, being careful not to cut into your stitches, and do the same thing for this side over here. And then I'm just going to turn everything right side out. I like to use a turning tool just to kind of, this is the precision turning tool. I've got a link to this in the description. I just kind of like to drag it on the inside. Just kind of pushes everything out nicely. Okay, so you'll give this a press, and then I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine. I'm going to sew the entire outer edge. I'm going to lengthen my stitch length to 3 millimeters just to get a nice top stitch, and I'm also going to sew the raw edge down. It just helps keep the layers in place so that things don't shift when I go to sew it to the top of the bag. Okay, so I'm moving back over to the sewing machine. I'm increasing my stitch length. Okay, so this flap is completed. I usually like to give it a press, keeping it away from the magnetic snap. And then all you need to do is, Danny, do you mind zooming out just for 1 second? Thank you. So this is the piece with the cargo pocket attached to it already. I'm just going to go ahead and snap that flap into place, and then pin the top edge, and then this top edge, I'm just going to sew it using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and that finishes the flap onto the cargo pocket. Actually, I think that style of flap is a really good match for the cargo pocket. I think it looks really nice. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to the second style of cargo pocket, and this flap just needs to be sewn a little bit differently. Instead of just sewing the sides and the bottom, we're going to sew all 4 edges and leave an opening at the top for turning. So I wanted to demonstrate both, just so you could see how both different types of pockets are finished. I decided to use a different style for this particular flap, and how I came up with, I cut it just a little bit smaller, as you can see by my orange line. This is where I folded it back before placing it on the fold. So what I did was I looked at my cargo pocket, and I wanted it to be about the same width. And so what I did was I lined up the paper pattern piece on the center of the magnetic snap, and I measured, and let me grab my ruler. I measured the side edge, and my goal was to get the side of the paper 1/4 of an inch bigger than the finished pocket, so that if I sewed this using 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, in theory, when the flap is done, it should be the same width as the pocket. and I wanted it to kind of fold over, so I also measured it so that I would have enough fabric so that it could fold over. A second option for a flap like this is to make it shorter so that it's just actually top stitch. So there's two different ways. I'll talk about both once I get this particular flat fabric sewn. So I got my exterior and my lining. I'm going to place those right sides together, and this time we're going to sew the sides and the bottom, except we need to sew at least 1 inch in along the top edge. So what I usually like to do, just because sometimes I forget when I get over to the sewing machine, I'm going to make a mark about 1 inch in from each of the side edges, and so we're going to start sewing at that mark and work the way around, and that will leave us an opening along the top edge for turning everything right side out. Okay, back to the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew this using 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm going to turn it back to my regular stitch length. Okay, so I'm going to have Danny zoom in a little bit. So we're going to leave the notches like we did with the other flap, and also I'm going to cut on a diagonal, but without cutting the stitches. That helps reduce bulk also in the top corner. And then you'll cut V's in both of the bottom curved edges. Okay, so I'm going to turn everything right side facing out, and I'm going to use that same precision turning tool to poke out the corners and kind of glide it along the curved edges as well. I like this tool a lot because it has this little round ball. I've actually never seen it poke through the fabric, which is what would happen sometimes with my previous turning tool. Okay, so for this particular style of flap, you're going to press the opening toward the wrong side by 1/4 inch. So I'm just finger pressing on set, but you'll actually be using your iron for that. And for the top stitching, we're actually only going to top stitch the sides and the bottom. We're going to leave the top edge, the top straight edge of this flap, for finishing that once we attach it to the body of the bag. So I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine. Again, I'm going to increase my stitch length to 3 millimeters, and again, just sewing the sides and the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to pull this cargo pocket piece back out. Thank you, Danny. You read my mind. So as I mentioned before, there's a couple different ways that this could be attached. This way won't make much sense for my example, just because I kind of calculated it for an alternate method, but just pretend like your bag piece is bigger. So you can either snap the flap into place and stitch directly across the top, stitching through your exterior fabric. What I accommodated for this particular pattern, actually let me leave the wonder clips on there for a second, is for the pocket to fold over before it attaches to the pocket. So I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and move that down. So I'm going to take my ruler and measure. That's about 1/2 inch. Same thing on the other side. So you want to make sure it's straight. Usually I like to use a chalk. I like using Clover Choco to draw a straight line. Just to keep it moving for the show, I'm just going to go ahead and eyeball it over here. So I usually like to have 2 lines of stitching in this particular type of flap. So I'm going to sew 1/8 of an inch away from the straight edge, and I'm also going to sew 1/4 of an inch away. It just gives some extra stability to the flap. So I'm going to do my best to hold this into place. You can use some traditional pins too if you'd like. And I'm just going to go ahead and take it over to the sewing machine. All right, I've still got it at that 3mm stitch length. And make sure you especially backstitch really well. And then here goes the second line of stitching. Okay, so here is what the finished flap looks like, and when I kind of bring it down to meet the cargo pocket, and then the pocket's finished. So I'm really happy with the 2 different styles of flap that I chose for each different application. I think it really shows off that particular pocket really well. And again, the link to the printable 10 styles of flaps are in the description, and I really try to tailor my demonstrations so that they can fit an array of projects. I feel like if I make the demonstrations generic, like not for a particular bag, but for whatever you choose to use it for, I feel like it gives you, kind of puts the creativity in your hands. And so I hope I've given you, through those 2 examples, some ideas for adding either pockets or flaps to bags that you make in future. And hope you enjoyed this demonstration. It was a lot of fun to work on. So I'm going to be answering some questions live in just a minute. So if you have a question for me, it can be a bag related question about a notion or a tool, or a general sewing question. Type your question in the comments right now, whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube. Danny's collecting all of your questions, and I'll answer as many as I can live. Before I get to the questions, I wanted to announce the winner of last week's giveaway, and that winner is Patricia Ordonez. So congratulations to Patricia. Please email me after the show so that I can get you set up with your prize. My email is sarah@sewsweetness.com, and Danny's going to drop my email address on the bottom of the screen. If you ever have a question for me or a comment, you can also feel free to email me there as well. All right, Danny, take it away with the questions. Londa says, does the flannel shrink more than cotton batting? I honestly don't know, but I'm assuming there's a whole bunch of people watching right now live that do know the answer to Londa's question. So if you know the answer, type it into the comments, and Danny will be sure to be on the lookout. Hopefully he can put a few of those comments up on the screen. Chris says, does it have scrim? Could you make bowl holders with this batting? I'm not sure about the bowl holders. Again, I'm going to have to ask if anyone knows the answer to this. Also, let me know in the comments. Again, Danny will be on the lookout. Wendy says, since you love books, do you have any quilt or crafty magazines you buy regularly? I do. It's from the UK, but it's called Love Patchwork and Quilting. I feel like that particular magazine is very similar to my tastes. Unfortunately, it's no longer, but my favorite was, gosh, was it Stitch magazine? I think it might have been Stitch magazine. They were really pretty bag heavy, and I had a few of my patterns in that magazine. I'm trying to think if it really was Stash. Gosh, I don't know. Anyway, that magazine is no longer. Marion says, thank you, Sarah. You have taught me so many skills that I am no longer afraid to modify bags anymore. Well, that's amazing. I really appreciate you saying that. I guess that's kind of what my goal is. And I do have a link to I do have a link in the description to my bag making tutorials page. I think we've got over 100 videos on there right now of bag making techniques similar to today's flap videos. So if you're interested If you ever have a question about something, hopefully I've covered it there. For instance, someone emailed me the other day and they wanted to know the difference between Decoville Heavy and Decoville Light. We actually have a video for that. It's on that bag making tutorials page. So if you haven't checked it out, I hope you will, especially if you have run into a question about something while you're making a bag. Deb says 2 to 3% shrinkage according to Birdie Bird. Thank you so much, Deb, for that information. I'm assuming that was probably on the packaging. Maybe I should have looked. Oh, yes. Danny, can you switch to the overhead? Since there were a few questions about that Birdie Bird, here's the back of the packaging. Here's what Deb mentioned about the shrinkage, 3% shrinkage, machine wash cold, tumble dry low, stitch up to 10 inches apart, low loft, and then I think everything on this side I mentioned already. Pre-washed fabric can be used. Just use caution while quilting to prevent any slippage. And they do have some more videos using their batting on their website. Mary says, what type of tools do you use for snaps and rivets? The manual ones that come with the kits are a bit awkward to use. So I now use my rivet press for both rivets and snaps. I agree with you, the handheld presses for installing rivets are a little bit tedious. Although if you don't have a rivet press, the regular method for installing magnetic snaps with the ones with the prongs, that works just as well also. I just happened to, in the last year, get a die for my rivet press to install the magnetic snaps, so I find that a whole lot easier, and I like the nice finish on the back. I do have a video, several videos regarding your question. I do have a video on the magnetic snap for rivet press, traditional magnetic snaps, and I have a separate video, I think it was our very first video, about my rivet press. So if you have specific questions about those, I think those 3 videos will address some of those questions. Faye says, since the batting is 100% cotton, it can be used on the bowl cozies. Thank you so much for that information, Faye. And Deb says, Birdie Bird says the flannel is pre-shrunk and the shrinkage actually comes from the cotton batting. Interesting. Very interesting. Ella says, I think with the flannel and the Birdie batting, it would probably work well for baby bibs. Oh, that's a great idea. I love that idea for that. Elizabeth says, is that vinyl or cotton fabric for the flaps in Bag Lab? Actually, this was Kona cotton, so all cotton fabric. I wanted to try to choose something that was less busy, so that's why I went with the solids rather than like a print fabric like I normally would. Cindy says, do you ever use a tool called bone to rub into the seam after turning the sewn pocket flap? It's called bone. No, I don't think so. I'm going to write that down so I could check it out after the show. Is it made by a certain company? I'm just worried that if I Google it, it'll come up with other things not sewing related to bones. Christina says, not a question, but I wanted to say I love your patterns and you make all your instructions so easy to follow. Thank you for sharing your talent with us. Thank you so very much, Christina. I really, really appreciate you saying that. Sheila says, what bag did you have the most fun designing? That is a great question, Sheila. It's hard to say because I feel like every favorite is the last one that I did. Just because I feel like really hyped up and excited about the most recent one. I don't know. Yeah, that's a really tough one. Susan said, could the flannel on the back of the batting be used as a backing for a quilt without adding another layer of backing fabric? Oh, that's a good question. Where did I put my little scrap? It's disappeared off my desk. I guess, especially if you were making a wall hanging, maybe that would be okay. I guess I don't see too big of a problem with that. Personal preference, maybe. Angela says, the deer and fox fabric, Sarah, what was the name? The deer and fox was, I've linked to all the fabrics in the description, but the one with the deer and fox, the fabric line was called Magic of Yosemite. So when you look for the links in the description, it's the link that says Magic of Yosemite. Janet says, I remember it is a bone folder. Oh, thank you. I will look for that. I'm very interested in that already. The bone folder is used in paper and card making, and yes, I use mine for crisp seams if I need them. I have never heard of that, but I am fascinated. Joanne says, a bone folder tool. I first saw Martha Stewart use it. Very interesting. I remember as a kid my mom watching Martha Stewart pretty often. Is that it on the questions, Danny? I apologize if I did not get to your question live, but I will be back again next Sunday. Danny will be joining me next Sunday, and I will be answering more questions then. So one last thing to get to, and that's the giveaway. This week's giveaway prize is a copy of the Coalition Bag video and PDF pattern plus a pack of Soft and Stable. If you happen to be the winner and you already own that pattern and video, I'm happy to substitute a different one of your choice. This particular pattern is available in the same pattern, 2 different sizes, a duffel bag size, which is a really great travel size, and also a handbag size. So Danny has prepared a slideshow of some of your Coalition bag makes. Alex made this one. As you can see, this is the duffel version. So this is what the duffel version looks like being held by a person, just for scaling size. Elizabeth made this one, and just based on looking at the photo, this is the handbag size, so smaller, more appropriate obviously for a handbag size. Jen made this one with cork, and she used glitter vinyl and Allison glass applique on her, so lots of creativity going on. And here's another one out in the wild. Kim made this one, and this is from their trip last year going through the airport, so you can see both a man and woman in those 2 photos holding the bag. Christy made this one with her usual burst of rainbow. She used Essex linen for the body and some vinyl for the straps. Laura made this one with a camo fabric and some patches on the front and some webbing for the handles. This one was made by Lisa. She used a bunch of patchwork. This looks like a handbag size, and she made a little bit of modification to the tabs on the front, which looked really great. Michelle made hers with Allison glass fabrics and some glitter vinyl, and as you can see, she styled hers for her next trip. We get a lot of requests for dance bags, so this is a Coalition made for Rosemary's Dancer. This black vinyl version was made by Shireen, and I really like the sort of cutouts on the vinyl. Another black vinyl version, this time made by Kimberly. She made sort of a double-sided strap with some webbing and some camo fabric, and the rest in the black vinyl. So amazing versions, hopefully to give you a little bit of inspiration. Thank you so much, Pat. Pat is sending a reminder out there for the thumbs up. We really do appreciate the likes and or the thumbs up. So thank you so much for doing that. And thank you so very much for joining us for Social Sunday. Oh, I have an extra question because our giveaways are randomly drawn out of all the comments left on the show. I like to always give a little extra question that you can answer at the end of the show. My question for tonight is, this is a hypothetical question, but hypothetically, if you won a free plane ticket, where would you go? What would you use that plane ticket for? So let me know in the comments. I'm itching to go to Disney World, so I would use mine to go to Orlando, Florida. But let me know in the comments. You have until the end of the day this Saturday to leave a comment on the show to be eligible for the giveaway. I'll announce the winner on next Sunday's show. Thank you so much for watching Social Sunday. I hope you have a great week and happy sewing. Bye, everybody.